Hello and welcome to Something to Think About with the British Bible School. I'm Mark Hill and it's my privilege to be able to tell you some of my thoughts. No one else will listen, so I'm very grateful to you tuning in. There is an ever-present danger of people falling away from the Lord. The New Testament warns about it, Jesus tells stories about it, and we even witness it. Now thankfully there are those who return after being away for a while, and this proves that prodigals can come home. The term prodigal, of course, comes from the parable Jesus told in Luke chapter 15, where we see there were two sons living and working in a nice home with a wonderful father, but the lure, the attraction of the far country, as it's called in some versions, appealed to the youngest son. What a rebellious, thankless son this was. First of all, he should wait until his father passed away naturally before he receives his inheritance. But he comes to his dad and he practically says, "I can't wait till you're dead. Give me my inheritance now." These two little words, "give me," suggest that this boy has a feeling of entitlement. And this is something that we seem to see so much today. People who don't deserve things but feel they are entitled by virtue of who knows what. Give me what's coming to me. I deserve this. Well, what makes you deserve it? Well, in this case, the father, according to the laws of the Old Testament, gave his younger son a third, his inheritance. To do this, the father might have had to sell off some assets. He would need to turn what he had into cash so the boy could get his money. This, in turn, would mean that the man's earning potential would be affected. The older brother, of course, would receive 2/3 later. The question is, why did this boy want to leave in the first place? And it's a question for us to ponder. Why does anyone want to leave the Lord, or the church for that matter? And I make a distinction there because some who leave the church claim that they're not losing their faith in God, they've just lost faith in the church, or maybe the way church is done, or maybe just some of the people, maybe just one person. There's other reasons, of course, as well. Let's think of this in terms of someone's home and family life. Not everyone who leaves is doing so just to chase after a dream or pleasure. There are those who leave home because of their home life. The Sunday best does not relate to the rest of the week. The children, or maybe husband or wife, don't see at home what was promised on a Sunday. We lose children or young people because their parents sadly divorce, and the one with custody perhaps moves away. The one left behind perhaps feels awkward about coming back, and maybe we lose them as well. In some terrible cases, there's abuse of different forms. So children are removed by the authorities for their own safety, and they're lost to us. Or there are those who are old enough, or the husband or wife moves out for their own protection because of abuse that they're suffering. Sometimes there's an addiction. So the child decides when they're old enough to leave home, or maybe the authorities again remove the children for their own safety. Whoever is on the receiving end of this trouble might well decide, well, this is all God's fault. I've been going to church, I've been living a good life. God didn't protect me, so why should I bother with him? Maybe people can't face what they perceive as the shame of seeing people at church due to all that's been going on. Or they don't like the God of the two-faced people who behave one way on a Sunday and a different way Monday to Saturday. They've all the answers on a Sunday, but the questions you have through the week they're oblivious to. And so there doesn't seem to be a relationship between everyday life and what takes place in a church meeting. Today's prodigals may be lost to the church because somehow we really didn't help in those difficult situations. So we need to be very slow to condemn people who are not showing up. There may be more beneath the surface than we know about. Now, in this particular case, in the story that Jesus told, there are prodigals who come from good homes where there was no abuse, where there's nothing but love and caring and good teaching and even a good church. But they leave because there was something that seemed to be missing. We all recognise, of course, don't we, that the grass is always greener on the other side. No matter which side you're on, the grass is greener on that other side. Now, if young people are what we're talking about, they'll perceive that their friends are allowed to do things that they are not, and they can't see why they shouldn't. Things that are acceptable in society outside of Christ are not accepted by biblical teaching. So they look at the world and they say to themselves, we've been gaslighted. There's all this fun to be had, and the only thing stopping me is the church. The lure of the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life overpowers them, and they walk away into sin. By the way, you can have fun as a Christian, but your mindset's different. The fun that the Christian has doesn't depend on loose morality, or on substance abuse, or on a disregard to your dignity. There's great fun to be had where there's no regrets afterwards. There comes a time in the life of a child, though, when they have to make their own decisions. So heartbroken and grieved because the son is turning his back on him, the father just watches as the child leave. Without a word, it seems, the father watches his son go down the road. He knows what the far country is like. He knows that it makes promises that it cannot keep. But isn't it interesting that we don't see a record of him trying to talk the son out of it? We want to wrap them up in cotton wool, but they have to find their way. I wonder if we do them any favours if we don't allow them to make mistakes. What lesson are we preventing them from learning by not letting them go? Yes, we must warn them, but they have to decide. The son is taking steps in the wrong direction, away from his father. But it's not always all at once. First of all, he goes far away as possible. He says he went to a distant country. Why? If we were to ask him, what would he say? Would he say, I want to go where nobody knows me, where there's no meddling relatives or older brother looking over my shoulder, telling me what I shouldn't be doing or what I should be doing? These days, of course, universities are in the far country. And the far country is often where there's not a church to belong to. Up to that time in this young man's life, he had enjoyed the blessings of his father, and now he continues to be blessed by having what he inherited but did not earn. What does he do with it? We're told that he misuses the blessings of his father. He spends the wealth that his father gave him on riotous or reckless living. It's said that we have a vicious cycle ourselves of spending your health getting wealth, but then spending your wealth trying to buy back your health. Now just imagine that. Imagine the extent of the young man's sin. I mean, his father's money is to be used for things that would honour the father, and he takes the very blessing that the father gave him, and he sins against his dad by doing the kinds of things that would hurt and grieve his father. He kind of gets the message, of course, when his fair weather friends leave him as the money runs out. God gives us strength. He gives us money. He gives us health. He gives us all sorts of blessings, and we say to him, it's mine. We're going to do our own thing with it. And we use God's blessings and God's gift to sin against him and do what hurts him. Then when the money runs out and our fair weather friends are nowhere to be seen, we suddenly blame God for all the trouble that we're in. Notice that this boy also despised his religion. Certainly based on the Old Testament in Jewish times, pigs were unclean animals, not just physically unclean, but they're also ceremonially unclean. And it doesn't matter to him now that he's working amongst them. He's not supposed to get near them, but he doesn't care what his religion teaches, because it's now a matter of survival. He's hungry, and there he is in the pigsty, willing to eat the pods the pigs were eating. What are you willing to give up in order to achieve whatever it might be? What are you wanting to give up and get out of the way? And does it matter anymore that they used to hold dear because it was important to God? Can we give up meeting together? We give up remembering Jesus and what he did for us by meeting together to take the emblems, the bread and the wine? Do we give up reading the Bible because I've got other things to read to progress my career? What do we give up so that we can enjoy a better life that really rewards us with very little of substance at all? The key to the turning round of this young man's life is in verse 17 of Luke chapter 15, where it says he came to himself, or he came to his senses. There are many excuses, of course, that he could have used not to go back. What about the shame? What about the embarrassment of admitting he was wrong and his dad was right? How awkward going back with nothing, all of the money having been spent. That would be an insult to dad. Surely it would be easier to stay put, as bad as it was. Add to that something else that would prevent him from going home. I'm convinced that the reason why many prodigals stay in the far country is what they're coming back to. Will he be judged by his brother? Will his faults be pointed out to him repeatedly? Will he have to sit on the spiritual naughty step until he's proved his worth so he can come back into full fellowship? Will others compare him to the ones that never left and how smart they were? Do we make it hard for people to return, or do we do all that we can to prepare the way back? It is difficult to come back when people know what you've done. Perhaps the main message of the story is about correcting the attitude of the older son. Jesus, after all, was defending those who are weak against the religious leaders. Are there any older brothers or sisters in the church today going to make it difficult for prodigals to return? Prodigals do need to come home, and the story is about this prodigal coming home. So the whole point is for people to come home. But what does it mean to come to your senses, to come to yourself? What does it take for a prodigal to finally say, I've got it wrong, I've done wrong, and I need to come back to God? Having been brought up in what we would call a Christian home, the prodigal had thrown himself into a life of sin. He went to the far country. Why? What really was the reason? I believe the ultimate addiction is independence. Having absolute control over your own life with no one to answer to for the choices made. If you pretend there is no God, that means there is no sin. The theory of evolution is unscientific and unproven, but people are willing to follow a falsehood if it means they can do without God. They don't need to listen to God anymore. Even among Christians we sometimes live like atheists. Excuses are made about living in immorality. It's okay that you're sleeping with your girlfriend because, well, you'll get married one day anyway. But we read in the New Testament that there should be no hint of sexual immorality among us. That means in my life and in yours. We don't really need a specific rule for this, that, or anything else. Just don't let there be a hint of any wrongdoing in your life. If in doubt, don't. If it seems like it might be sin, don't. If it's a grey area, don't. There's not to be a hint. How difficult is it to come back to God when that part of your relationship must stop? When you found fulfillment or love in a relationship that only according to biblical teaching might be wrong, how do you turn from it? For many, what they do is to distance themselves from the church and go to a far country where it can be blatant, never mind a hint. But when you realise your need for God, and when you know things must change, what do? You have to realise and recognise that whatever it is you've done, God is going to not only forgive you, but now in his care and by submitting to his lordship, you will need to live according to his word and not by our own preferences. How do you give up the sin that provided the only enjoyment or fulfillment or sense of being wanted and loved in your life? Know that God will forgive you and he will have you back. Even though you gave up God and the church for the illusion of independence and control. And it is an illusion. Because if you're living for sin, you are not in control. Jesus said that you're the servant of sin. Sin tells you to do this and you do it. In the name of being free, I'm free to choose to do whatever I want. Well, try and stop sinning then. And see if you really are the one in control. The illusion of control. What will it take for us to convince someone to leave that illusion and come back. The prodigal says to himself, I'm going back to my father because even his servants are better off than I am. I really wish he had a better motivation than that. I wish he'd said, I'm going to go to my father because I broke his heart. No, this ungrateful brat is going back because he's hungry. He doesn't want to work with the pigs anymore. And yet the father is so gracious, he receives him anyway. The son prepares a speech about how unworthy he is and how he can ask his dad to take him back as a servant. But he can hardly get the words out because his father is hugging him so tightly. He'd been waiting and watching, you see. He'd lost interest in the farm. He was constantly looking down the road. That's why the Bible says that even when the son was a great way off, his father saw him and ran to him and kissed him. This child is saying, I'm just a servant now. And the father's saying, bring the best robe. You don't do that for a servant. Put a ring on his finger. You don't do that for a servant. And put shoes on his feet. Servants don't wear shoes. And he wanted the fatted calf to be brought and killed because his son was dead and is alive now. He was lost and has been found. The older brother, of course, was not amused. Jesus was saying to the Pharisees, you're criticising me for welcoming sinners and eating with the drunkards and the prostitutes and connecting with those kinds of people. And you're not rejoicing about the fact that they are coming to the Father. All you can think of is, why do they deserve such love and grace? You say, look at us. I've been in this church for 30 years. What's been done for me? Look what we've done over the years. And we don't even have these kinds of blessings. Well, whose fault is that? The older brother, even though he was a son, lived like a slave. The father said, don't you understand that everything I have is yours? Enjoy it. Throw your own party. The problem for legalists is that they will never do that. You see, in order to appear righteous, they have to make it look like they're suffering to stay faithful. What would it be like if you actually enjoyed your faith? You enjoyed the fact that you'd been forgiven, that you rejoiced in your salvation. Parents of prodigals and the church family have to prepare from the heart for prodigals to come home. You may well be the one standing in the way of a prodigal coming back. Can they see Jesus in your eyes, or is it disgust or disappointment in what they've done? Look at the way the father ran to meet his son. And where was his mother? Perhaps her attitude was part of the problem. She isn't written about, of course. I'm only guessing here. But why would the son want to come home with a critical, judgmental mother waiting for him? We have to see people through Jesus' eyes and recognise we all need his grace and mercy. So even if you've behaved like the prodigal son and wasted all that God has given you, even if you wasted time by being away from him, he wants to bless you again. It's not too late. Even if right now you're far away, as soon as you make up your mind to come home, he will meet you. Angels celebrated at your new birth, and they will surely celebrate when you return. We're told this in a line of a hymn about Jesus being sent by his Father to us, so that the vilest of sinners who truly believes that moment from Jesus a pardon receives. Your bonds of sin are strong. You might think nothing bad has happened and fool yourself with the illusion that it can't be that bad then. But why wait until it is? Why wait until you're feeding the pigs? Jesus is watching and waiting and is ready to forgive and to restore you. Whether you're a prodigal who was saved but wandered off, whether you are a prodigal because you never did find Jesus and have never put him on in baptism for the forgiveness of your sins, even if you're an older brother or sister that stuck around but needs an attitude change to help others return, today it can all change. If you'd only come to your senses, repent and come home.